Hello and welcome. My name is Amber, and every year I take part in a series challenge where the aim is to read books that are part of the series. I started taking part in this challenge because I am very good at starting series and very bad at ending them. So I am currently in the middle of uncountable series. There are different categories within this challenge, and they are series you are continuing, series you are finishing, series you are starting, and series that you are reading from start to finish. So I also added two subcategories for myself, and they were to continue or finish 5-star series and to continue or finish audiobook series as well. So what I'm going to do in this video is go through the books that I aimed to read last year and then whether I read them or not. So first of all, series that I wanted to continue. First series was 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. I had read the first book ages ago, and that was 50 Shades of Grey. And this year I wanted to read the second and third, which were 50 Shades Freed and 50 Shades Darker. So this is a series about the relationship between Anna and Christian. It's an unconventional relationship in that it's a sub-dom relationship, and to enter it, Anna must sign a contract. The relationship is supposed to be purely sexual, but it soon turns into something more, and Christian breaks all his rules, which are basically around forming emotional attachments and stuff. I didn't actually think much of the first book, but I wanted to give the author a second chance. And then, because I had the books in a bind-up, I actually ended up rereading the first one, which is probably good because it's been a while since I read it, so I couldn't remember it very well. But I did discover that I still didn't like it, and I gave the first book 2 stars. The second book I liked a little bit more, but that would be a low 3 stars. And the third book I liked slightly more again, but it was still a 3-star. I found that the majority of the plot was dull, but in the third book there was a thriller aspect that made it a little more interesting. The relationship between Anna and Christian was not a healthy one. I did think, however, that E.L. James did a good job at writing characters and character relationships. So although it wasn't a healthy relationship, I felt that how the characters interacted was realistic, and that also extended to the side characters as well. Now, some people would say that I actually completed the series this year, as I finished the main trilogy. But when I added this to my challenge, I was counting the books from Christian's point of view in the series as well. I think some would class it as 2 separate series, some would count it as 1 series, but for me, I was counting it as 1 series, so I've only read half of it. I am intrigued to read the other half. I have low expectations. So the second series that I aim to continue was the Georgina Kincaid series by Richelle Mead. So Richelle Mead is more popular for her Vampire Academy series, which I've seen quite a bit of on BookTube, but I've never seen any mention of her other works. This is a series for adults. It's an urban fantasy, and it's about Georgina, who is a succubus, and what this means is she can change her appearance at will, and she can change her appearance to match the desires of other people. And whenever she has sexual contact with someone, she steals their life force. This series follows the format where in each book there's a different crime, usually murder, to investigate, but across the whole series there's an overreaching plot. I had already read the first 2 books in this series, which were Succubus Blues and Succubus on Top, and I enjoyed them, hence reading more. I only intended on reading the next 2 in the series, which were Succubus Dreams and Succubus Heat. So originally I was reading them in physical format. I found them on audiobook, so I switched to the audiobook. And I was listening to them while at work, and I needed more audiobooks, and the next 2 were also available, which were Succubus Revealed and Succubus Shadows. So I ended up listening to the rest of the series as well. I had also previously read the short story, which is City of Demons, so that meant that I actually completed the series this year. However, as I put it in my challenge for continue, that's where I'm going to be counting it. I ended up enjoying the series. It's quite a standard urban fantasy, and although I would recommend it, I don't think it stands out above the rest. I enjoyed the plot and I enjoyed the characters, but I wasn't too bothered about the romance. The romantic interest wasn't a character I really gelled with. I didn't really care that much about him. But what I did like was watching them trying to navigate their relationship when they couldn't have any sexual contact, because if they did, it would drain some of his life force and reduce his lifespan as well. The next series was Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Again, I started this series a while back, so I wanted to continue it. I'd already read Colour of Magic and The Light Fantastic, which are the first two books. It was after reading these that I found out that that's not the recommended order for reading them. And I did find that I was disappointed with the first two, because I'd heard so much about Terry Pratchett and his works that it didn't live up to the hype. I do now know that the series is supposed to get better as it goes along, and again, those were not the best books to start with. It's a series that can be split up into smaller series, and I think it's all about a world that is on the back of a giant turtle. The books are very humorous, but they can also be satirical and have social commentary in them. They're also very much full of whimsy, and they're not always logical either. So the books that I'd already read were part of the Rinceworld series, and the book that I wanted to read this year was Equal Rights, which is the first book in the Witches series. I don't know if that's its full name or not. I did read it, and it was enjoyable. I think I liked it more than the first two books, but it's been so long since I read them that I can't say for sure. It did make me want to carry on with the series, which I think is more than the first two books did. So it could be a series that reappears on my series challenge in the future. Then the next series was the Confessions series by James Patterson and Maxine Petro. This is a YA murder series following Tandy Angel, and the first murder that she has to solve is her parents, while she is one of the prime suspects. While trying to solve the murder, she also uncovers some family secrets that change how she views herself and her family. And I think as the series progresses, there's more unravelling of secrets, more murders to solve, and more dealing with the secrets and the lies within her family. I'd previously read the first book, which was Confessions of a Murder Suspect, and this year I planned on reading The Private School Murders and The Paris Mysteries. I only managed to read The Private School Murders. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. Now, I believe that this wasn't due to the quality of the book, but rather, I think when I read the first one, I was either still a teenager or in my early 20s, and it's been 10, maybe more years since I read it. And since reading it, I've got older, I've matured, and I think that although I still enjoy YA, I don't connect to the characters as much as I used to. But I still plan on continuing at some point, but again, I don't know when that'll be. The last series that I wanted to continue was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So when I read the first 4 books, I thought there were only 4, and that's because I read them in a bind-up called The Trilogy of the Four. So being a trilogy doesn't make sense that there's 4, and it most certainly didn't make sense that there would be more, but there is. So in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Arthur Dent is trying to stop his home being bulldozed for a new road when his planet gets destroyed for a new road instead. He is rescued at the last moment by his friend Ford, who turns out to be an alien who is visiting Earth in order to gain information for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And this basically kickstarts his space adventure. So again, it's a humorous book. This one is sci-fi rather than fantasy, and it does include a bit of social commentary as well. This year I planned on reading Mostly Harmless and also And Another Thing, which is written by Owen Colfer, who I believe is the author of the Artemis Fowl books. But I didn't get around to reading either of these books. So for the series that I wanted to complete, the first series was Death Note Black Edition by Tsugumi Ohba and Takeshi Obata. This is a series about Light who discovers a Death Note. Now, a Death Note is a notebook where if someone's name is written down in it, then they die. He uses it to kill criminals, basically becoming a vigilante. But when the police start hunting him down, the lengths he will go to protect his identity keep growing. I started reading this series as a teenager after seeing the live-action Japanese version of the movie. I only got about halfway through the series, so I'm now rereading it with the aim to complete it. And before this year, I had read the first book, and this year I was supposed to read for volumes 2 through 6, but I ended up only reading the second volume. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did previously. I still rated it quite highly, and I do hope to continue at some point. And I aim to finish Pride and Prejudice and Zombies by Steve Hockensmith. This is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but with zombies. So while Elizabeth is moving through society being unconventional and finding Darcy insufferable, she is also kicking ass and protecting the country from zombies. I had already read the prequel Dawn of the Dreadfuls and read the first book Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, so I only had Dreadfully Ever After to read, which I did read. I thought the series as a whole was fun, and I actually liked it more than Pride and Prejudice. But that might be because I'm not the biggest fan of Pride and Prejudice. But apparently adding zombies makes it a lot better. But I think the series was between a 3 and a 4 star for me. I then aimed to finish the series Between the Lines by Jodi Picoult and Samantha Van Leer. So Jodi Picoult writes for adults, but this is a YA duology that she wrote with her daughter. It is about Delilah, who is obsessed with a particular book, when one day the hero speaks to her from the pages, literally, and this leads to a bit of an adventure. I read the first book, Between the Lines, years ago, and it was a light, daydreamy sort of book, and I didn't know that there was a second one until recently. That second one is Off the Page, and I intended on reading it this year, but I did not. And I aim to complete the series Maximum Ride by James Patterson. This is another series that I read as a child, but this one I have actually read in its entirety before. And I remember loving the start of it, but not liking the end of it. And I wasn't sure whether this was because I had grown out of the series, or because it was just not as good. Having reread The Angel Experiment and School's Out Forever the other year, I'm starting to lean towards it being that the books are not as good later on in the series, rather than it being me. As reading those two books again, I found that I still like them. I didn't like them as much as I did as a kid, but I also liked them a lot more than I remember liking the later books. So the Maximum Ride series follows a group of genetically modified kids who have wings. They started life in a lab, but one day one of the scientists broke them out and they've been living with him since. However, just before the start of the book, he goes missing, and soon they find themselves hunted by people from the lab who are trying to bring them back. Having reread the first two books, I can see why I liked it as a child. It's a really easy read that's full of action and humour, and the characters are really likeable as well. This year I was supposed to read Saving the World and Other Extreme Sports, The Final Warning, Max, Fang, Angel, Nevermore, and Maximum Ride Forever. I think they ran out of inspiration naming the books at some point. I did not read any of these. Then there was 50 Shades of Grey by C.T. Gray. This is a parody of the 50 Shades trilogy, and it's basically just innuendos around gardening. Many years ago, I bought the first two books for my dad and ended up reading them on the bus home, and they were funny. When I saw there was a third one, I bought that as well, and I aimed on reading it this year, but despite how short the book was, I didn't get round to it. So now on to 5-star series that I wanted to finish or continue. The first one was The Black Magician by Trudy Canavan. I loved this series and had read the main trilogy, which is The Magician's Guild, The Novice, and The High Lord. So in this series, every year the magicians purge the city of undesirables, which they say are dangerous and criminal, but are really just for lower classes. Now there are dangerous people and criminals among them, but many of them are made that way due to inequality. During the purge, a young girl is seen to use magic, and this girl is one of those that they deem to be undesirable. Considering that all magicians are identified at an early age so that they can go study at the guild, that magic is never seen in the lower classes, and because when she used her magic, she used it in defiance against them, the guild wants to have her found. The only book I hadn't read was the short story The Mad Apprentice, which I have in Legends of Australian Fantasy, which is an anthology of Australian fantasy writers. I had planned on reading the whole anthology this year, but I read none of it. Then I aim to finish Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is about a former mercenary who settles down and opens a coffee shop in a town where nobody has heard of coffee. When I added this to my challenge, I hadn't realised that the second book, Brigands and Bread Knives, was coming out in 2025, so I hadn't actually included that in the challenge. Instead, I'd included the short story Pages to Fill. But in the end, I read Brigands and Bread Knives, but I didn't read Pages to Fill, so I didn't actually read the books for the challenge that I meant to. I wanted to complete the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. This is a series based on Russian folklore that centres on Vasya, who lives in a village near a forest. One day her dad remarries, and with his wife comes a priest in Christianity. As the villagers start to turn to Christianity, they stop believing in the old spirits, who become weaker and are then unable to protect the village from evil spirits. I started the first book, The Bear and the Nightingale, in 2024. I finished it in 2025 and rated it 5 stars. So I then added it to the Continue or Complete 5-star series subcategory of the challenge. And that meant I needed to read The Girl in the Tower and The Winter of the Witch. I didn't read either of them. Part of this was because I wanted to read it in winter, as it's quite an atmospheric book, which really fits with the winter season. Then there was The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. We probably all know the plot of this. It's set in a dystopian world where every year the Hunger Games is held, which is a tournament where one boy and one girl is chosen from each district to participate, basically in a fight to the death. When her younger sister is randomly selected for the games, Katniss Everdeen volunteers to take her place, and the story basically expands from there. So I'd already read the main trilogy, which is The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, and I'd also read the sequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This year another prequel came out, which was Sunrise on the Reaping, and this one I did actually read. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't find it as devastating as I was told it would be. I rated it 4 stars in the end, as I think some of the other books in the series were better. Then finally in this category, I aim to read The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. This was a late addition to the challenge, as although I read Malice in 2024, I only rated it 4 stars, but then I read Valor at the start of 2025 and gave that 5 stars. I needed one more series for this challenge, so I added this one. So this series is an epic fantasy where the land's myths start to come true, and an ancient prophecy about the forces of light and dark becomes relevant. This year I aim to read Ruin and Wrath, which were the 3rd and 4th book. I did read these, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. In fact, this series was my favourite series of the year, and Valor ended up being my second, and Ruin my first, favourite book of the year. It's an action-packed series, which really makes you care for the characters, and I think it was because of the characters that this series ended up being my favourite, as I ended up really feeling for them and caring what would happen to them. Then the series that I aim to read from start to finish. The first off was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and that was A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and A Court of Silver Flames. So this is a series that everyone goes on about. I've heard such good things from it, and I know so many people that have read it and enjoyed it. So last year I intended on finally reading it and seeing what all the fuss was about. I don't know that much about the series. I believe it's about Feyre, who when trying to provide food for her family accidentally shoots a wolf. This wolf turns out to be a fairy, and as punishment she is taken back to the fairy realm. I can't tell you much more than that, because I did not read it. Next I aim to read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. That is The Poppy War, The Dragon Republic, and The Burning God. I know even less about this series. I know it is inspired by historic events, and I know it is about a girl who attends a military academy, then war starts. I also know that the last book had people sobbing, and that was a big part of why I wanted to read it, and yet I also didn't get around to this one. Then there was Battle Angel Alita by Yukito Kishiro. I aim to read volumes 1 to 9. So again, I don't know much about this. Even though I have seen the movie, I don't remember it that well. So in this, a cybernetic doctor finds a cyborg head in a junk heap and rebuilds the body, and then a clue from her past surfaces her fighting ability, and she tries to unravel the truth around who she is and how she got to be where she was. Again, I didn't read it. Then I aim to read the Demon Artist series by Darren Shan. This is a YA horror series about the people protecting the world from demons. I did read a good chunk of this series. I read Lord Loss, Demon Thief, Slaughter, Beck, Blood Beast, Demon Apocalypse, and Death Shadow. I enjoyed these books. They're the sort that you don't have to think about much, and I found that I flew through them quickly. I didn't quite finish this series, as I still have Wolf Island, Dark Calling, and Hell's Heroes left, but I did better with that series than any of the others in that section. I also plan to read the Fern Capel series by Jan Siegel. This is a series that I read years ago, and I barely remember anything about it, but I do remember really enjoying it, and I remember there being a mermaid in the first book. So this series consists of Prospero's children, Dragon Charmer, and the Witch Queen. From what I remember of the first book, I believe there are 2 timelines. One is when Fern moves into a new home with her family and discovers magic. And in the second, we're in Atlantis, with the events leading up to its submersion. And again, I did not get round to this series. So now for the series that I wanted to start. I wanted to start The Scholomance by Naomi Novik, and do this by reading the first book, A Deadly Education. This book is set at the Scholomance, which is a school for the magically gifted. Well, it's a bizarre school in that there are no teachers, but there are monsters, and your chance of making it to graduation are slim. Elle attends this school, but she has not yet made any allies, and it's essential that she does make allies, as they're key to her actually being able to survive the school. I did read the first book, but I was not completely enamoured with it. I found there was too much telling and not enough showing, and it felt like it took quite a while for the plot to actually begin. I might continue it at some point, but I don't have any concrete plans. I then aim to start the Saviour series by Jenna Moreci. The first book is The Saviour's Champion, and it's another series I don't know that much about. I do know that it is about Tobias, who is in a gladiator-style tournament, where if he wins, he gets to rule by the Saviour's side, and I also know there's romance. I got this book as I follow Jenna's YouTube channel, where she gives writing advice, but I still haven't read the book. I then aim to start The Gin Wars by Christine Pope with the first book, Chosen. This is a book that I've had on my e-reader for ages, and I don't remember anything about it, why I picked it up, or where I picked it up from. According to Goodreads, it's a dystopian where humanity have mostly been wiped out. Jessica is being guided by a voice in her head, which she assumes is her guardian angel, but she soon realises that it's not an angel at all. I didn't read this one either. Then there was Mine by Janelle Fowler. This is another book that I've had on my e-reader for years and I don't know anything about. But looking at Goodreads, You Are Mine, which is the first book, is about Serena, who is owned by a warlock, but is then sold to a barbarian. She then decides to start breaking the rules and discovers a new world. That's about what I got from the synopsis, and I can't tell you any more as I didn't read it. Then I aim to start the Amina Al-Sarafi series. This is by Shannon Chakraborty, and the first book is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. It's about Amina, who was a notorious pirate, but is now retired, and she's tracked down by the wealthy mother of a former crewmate who has a job that she can't refuse, but she soon starts to think that there's more to the job than she's been told. Again, I didn't read it. Then finally, the audiobook section. So first, I aim to listen to The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I had listened to The Hobbit already, read by Rob Inglis, and I enjoyed it, apart from the singing. So I wanted to listen to the trilogy read by the same narrator. So I listened to The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. They were okay to listen to. I did find myself tuning out at times, and I have come to the conclusion that although I really like the Lord of the Rings movies, I could take or leave the books. I then aim to continue listening to His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I'd listened to the main trilogy with a full cast audio and really enjoyed it, so that's The Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. So now I wanted to listen to the novellas, which were Once Upon a Time in the North, The Collectors, Lyra's Oxford, and Serpentine, and I might listen to them all. So His Dark Materials is about Lyra, who sets off on a trip to the north with her guardian Mrs. Coulter. But on the way, she discovers that Mrs. Coulter is linked to an organisation that is kidnapping children, including her friend Roger, who disappeared a little while back, so she sets out to rescue him. But the series expands from there, until it covers multiple worlds and conspiracies. It explores morality and consciousness and is a commentary on certain things in the world. The novellas you don't need to read to understand the series. They're more like little add-ons that just explore the characters a bit more, but you don't miss anything by not reading them. So next I intended to listen to the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, the sequel being Go Set a Watchman. But I actually changed my mind as I had previously read it physically and I couldn't bring myself to read it again because I really didn't like it. So To Kill a Mockingbird is a brilliant book about Scout, who is growing up in South America during the 1930s. We get to see the events unfolding around her through her eyes, and that involves a black man who is accused of rape by a white woman. Scout's father, Atticus, is working in defence and is one of the few people who believe in his innocence. Now, there is debate over whether the second book should have been released. It's sold as a sequel, but I believe that it's actually based on an earlier draft of To Kill a Mockingbird before Harper Lee changed it so that Scout was a child and not an adult. Apparently, before she died, she agreed to have it published, but there's some debate over whether she actually wanted that. And personally, I hated the sequel. It wasn't needed, it didn't add anything, and it did Atticus dirty. I couldn't bring myself to read it again, and I don't really know why I put it on the challenge in the first place. I think it's because I'm a completionist, and I'm not very good at DNFing things, but I think in this case I'm definitely DNFing it because I can't read that again. So I then planned on continuing Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So I listened to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland on audiobook ages ago. So last year I wanted to read Alice's Adventures Overground, which I think is actually an earlier version of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and also read Alice Through the Looking Glass and What She Found There. These books are children's classics about a girl named Alice who follows a white rabbit into Wonderland, which is another world, and it's full of whimsy and bizarreness. I ended up listening to an audiobook that had all three stories in it, and that also had the Jabberwocky poem. It was an entertaining read, and it whiled away a few hours at work, apart from Alice's Adventures Overground, which I found was a bit dull, but everything else was fine. Then finally, I aim to continue the Green Ember series by S.D. Smith. I listened to the Green Ember a while back and can barely remember it if I'm honest. It is about Heather and Pickett, who are two rabbits whose lives were upturned, and they end up pivotal to overthrowing a tyrant. I admit that I didn't actually like the first book. I found it quite dull, but I wanted to give the author another chance, so I only actually put the second book, Ember Falls, on the challenge, so I could decide whether I was going to continue the series or whether I was going to DNF it, as I like to give the series two chances. Don't know why. I didn't get around to doing that, and at this point I don't know whether I'm going to try again with the series or if I'm going to DNF it. So that was everything I planned on reading and did read for my series challenge 2025. Now it's time to look at the stats and see how well I did. I have a feeling I didn't do well. So I aim to continue 5 series through reading 9 books. I read 6 books, continuing 4 series. I aim to complete 5 series through reading 15 books. I read 2 books and completed 1 series, so I really did not do very well there. I aim to continue or finish 5 5-star series by reading 7 books. Sounds easy. I read 3 books and completed 2 series, which isn't great. I aim to read 5 series from start to finish by reading 31 books. That's a bit of a challenge. I read 7 books, starting 1 series but not finishing it, so that's not great either. Then I aimed to start 5 series by reading 5 books, and I read 1 book starting 1 series. Brilliant. Finally, I aimed to complete or finish 5 audiobook series by listening to 11 books, and I listened to 9 books and finished 3 series, so I didn't do too bad there. Overall, I aimed to read 78 books, and I read 28, which is less than half, so I didn't really do well in this challenge, especially as the aim had been to end the year being partway through less series than I started, and I think most definitely I am now partway through more series than I was at the start of the year. I have, however, realised that how I've been doing the challenge usually leads to me increasing the number of series I'm partway through rather than decreasing it. So I've decided that this year what I'm going to do is not do all the subcategories. So I'm not going to do the subcategory of reading series from start to finish. And I'm also not going to do the subcategory of starting a series. So instead I'm going to keep the categories for continuing and finishing series, but I'm going to have them for both physical books and audiobooks. And when I say physical books, I'm also meaning ebooks, though technically they're not physical books, but for this challenge I'm counting them. And I would also do continuing 5-star series and finishing 5-star series. I think at the moment I only actually have one series that I'm currently rating 5 stars, so I'm going to include it, but there's not going to be many in the category. So I'm going to do a separate video for my 2026 challenge, and I realise that this one is a long one, but I hope it's not too long. But I think editing me is going to think it's definitely too long. Did any of you read any good series last year? Let me know in the comments. And as always, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will regain my voice as it's starting to croak, and catch you in the next one.